Hey everybody, my name is Mark Heaps and I wanted to do a quick review of a new filter I've been playing with for PSD Toots, and this is a filter called Retrographer by Mr. Retro. This is a photograph of my daughter and I want to give it a worn, distressed, vintage, antique sort of look. It's very trendy right now to do that, and it's probably coming from all these smartphone apps that we see out there that are creating these stylized photographs. But the challenge with that is I'm never going to get a professional portrait like this from my cell phone, and those cell phone apps don't give me the controls I need to be able to do a high-res print professional job. I can never use it commercially. So rather than following some of the tutorials that I've seen and downloading grunge packs and brush packs and different texture surfaces, etc., I found this filter plugin. And let me show you a quick example of what can be produced with this. So this is the original image, and in just a few minutes I managed to produce a look like this, where you're adding light leaks, you've got some film grain, there's some nice vignetting been added, color tinting is being applied, and I've even got this rusty paper clip that's been added in here. And these are all the sort of things that give it that really believable organic analog look and feel. Now here's another possible look. Maybe you want to just do a slide frame. These are some of the things that are built inside of this filter. There's huge libraries of all those textures and frames and surface properties that we would spend hours looking for automatically built in. So I found this to be a huge time saver. Last but not least, maybe just an old newspaper print. It's got a halftone pattern in here. There's a little bit of a light stain going on the paper. And I've even managed to add a pretty authentic coffee mug stain into my image. Okay? Now let's look at how this actually gets produced. So here's our original image. I downloaded it from the site, got it installed, and once it's installed, you just go to Filter, come down to Mr. Retro, and choose Retrographer. Here's the UI design. Kind of looks vintage in itself, and a couple parts to the work area here. Let me just zoom out so you can see more of the preview. We've got a manual button up here which allows you to access the user manual for the actual filter, and we've even got an automatic range button that'll take you to the website where you can see a gallery of all these effects and maybe download some presets. Now, the first place that I like to actually show everybody in this particular filter is the auto button. I like to call it the magic button, and the reason is you just press it and you immediately get a randomized mix of the Retrographer controls. Let's try it again. Okay, so there's a cool vintage frame. One more. Oh, nice stain and wash going on in here. I like that effect. Okay, nice and faded. So you could do that, and if you like what you get, cool, you're happy, press OK, move on, and keep on playing. Also, if you want to be able to reapply that effect, you can just come down and save this as a user camera and use it again and again and again, which is a nice feature of this filter. But what if you want to get into some of the more modular controls, really get granular with this? Well, let me go ahead and reset everything. Okay, now we've got over here on the left a series of camera categories, and inside of each of these there's some presets for all of these types of cameras. So this is where you're going to see most of the effects immediately just by clicking. Okay, so let's say for example I come down to damaged grunge cameras and I choose gnarly old photograph. Very fast I get an old sort of sepia selenium tint photograph with nice distress, wear and tear in here, some stains, a little bit of film grain. This would have taken me hours to produce. Okay, would have spent a lot of time here. Let's check out another one. Let's go ahead and reset that. We'll just press this back arrow. Maybe we want to try retro cameras. Come down here and pick hazy recollection, sorry. And you can already see I've got this cool scalloped frame, little dreamy blur on the outside, cool vintage toning going on, and again, really, really fast. But what if you want to get into controlling how all of these effects are applied? Okay, let's reset everything again and just go back. So across the top here, we've got 7 tabs or buttons that are the categories for how you control these effects. So camera is kind of the master control with all of these preset categories, but across the rest of here, we've got 6 more buttons. So let's take a look at these. There's lens, and you get into some controls here for how you might want to blur this image. So for example, adjust focus. So we've got some presets down at the bottom again, or we've got some presets in this ribbon across the top, and these are really more preset shapes and masks. So let's try this square that we see here. Now you can go in and choose what kind of blur shape you want. You can get into a blur style. Maybe you want basic blur or a zoom blur. You can even get into offset, right, and setting some coordinates in here. Now I'm not really big into putting math into my artwork because I'm not that good at math. So if you hold the command key on a Mac or control key on Windows, you can even just grab this crosshair and move where you want that center of the blur to take effect. And that's kind of a nice controller there. You can even get into having a blur angle. Now, if you can't really tell what's going on, one of the things that you can do is go down here and press the Show Blur button. And this will bring up the mask to let you see exactly where the blur is being applied. And then this thing that looks like a gradient editor through here is actually kind of a node editor. It allows you to move these individual components, and you'll see that changing the mask. And what that's going to do is vary how the blur is applied. So if I press that Show Blur button again, now we can see the new features of the nodes that were edited applied to the blur. Okay, so now that these new settings are applied, let's go check out some of the other controls. Maybe we want to add a color lens gel. We could go in here and click on a preset. We could edit these nodes again. We could choose a different shape if we want to, new angle. We've got a new feature down here though. This is a little offset axes. I call this the sphere. It allows you to move this around so you can just set the center for where this effect is being applied. You can get into picking some intensity, some controls, all kinds of things going on in here. Same thing with lens distortion. We could get across here and add some aberration in here. Maybe we want to turn that up, add an aberration scale, kind of get that cool offset effect that looks like some old 3D glasses, some ghosting, and ghosting opacity. I'm just going to turn that up so you can see it. And again, we've got these spherical controls that allow you to offset the center of where this effect is being applied. So now you can see that I've offset the ghosting. This looks almost like a double exposure, right? You can also get into barrel distortion if you want to create like a fisheye effect and just turn up the barrel curvature here. That's up to you. But one feature that's really, really cool is what if you want to compare the effects if you don't want to be committal? Well, you could go up here and you see it says composite, lens 1, add lens, and original. If you just click on add lens, now you get back to your original image before you got into the lens controls. And you could go back and choose all new settings, maybe something completely different. And if you like that, then you can decide between the two. Click on lens 1 and see what you had before. Click on lens 2, see what you've got. Pick the one that you want to keep, and just go ahead and press on the red X of the one you don't. And that'll get rid of it, and this is the one that you've now got to keep. Okay? Pretty cool feature. Let's go ahead and reset everything though, because I want to show you guys some other options. For example, we've got underneath flash, a very similar UI that we just saw for lens. You can go in here and pick what type of flash, like a pro flash with a hood, maybe an enhanced flash. So all kinds of options in here. We've got our preset ribbon again, so we could pick some colors. That's kind of a nice retro effect right there. And then you've got all these modular granular controls for flash intensity, hotspot size, intensity for the hotspot, hotspot edge, and you can even pick colors for the flash. So maybe I want something that's more of a blue versus the yellow. And again, we've got our spherical control so we can offset the center of this effect. Okay, more presets down at the bottom if you want to play with some of these. But then we start getting into the area that allows this to start looking less digital. And that's kind of the point of this effect, right? If you're going to make something look retro and vintage, it needs to not look like it was made on a computer. So film is a really useful tool in that goal. If I go across here, we can click on one of the presets. And that's some cool tone mapping for film. But what I really want is to be able to make this look worn out and organic. So to get that analog effect, I'm going to add film grain. If I come down to film grain 7 here, I can just turn up my grain scale. Start seeing that appear in the picture. Got my grain intensity and smoothness. And I really don't want my grain to be smooth, because if I want this to look old and worn out, I want to really take advantage of that texture. We can also pick colors for our grain. And if we want to get even further than that, we can press this edit tone button, and this gets you into a curve editor that's really a contrast tone curve of how that contrast is being spread throughout the grain inside of this image. It's kind of similar to a densitometer curve, or what you might see in the duotone image mode in Photoshop. So now let's go ahead and get into the fun stuff. Let me go back to camera and just reset all of this. I'm going to go to the lab. Now the lab should feel like it's really a basic editor, something similar to most photographic editors like Photoshop, Lightroom, etc., or anything else that you're using. We've got exposure controls to brighten the image. We've got luminosity if we want to be able to change some of that gamma control. We've got a global hue editor if we want to just shift all the colors in the picture. We've got saturation if we want to make the color more intense, or even turn it all the way down to the bottom and get a really nice black and white image. But what's cool in here for the lab is we've also got this preset ribbon again that's got a great range of presets already built in. For example, I've recently discovered that this is my favorite. Kind of gives me that Jamie Ibarra kind of effect, which is really, really nice. We can also go in and affect some of the individual color frequencies like red, green, or blue. And we've even got a tone curve for each of these channels. So again, just more modularity and more control than you could probably ever use, but it sure is fun to play with and just slide things around and see what happens. Now, here's where I really get into some of the fun stuff. Under effects, we've got vignette, light leak, and halftones. Vignette, we see this all the time, regularly being added to images these days. I'm just going to go ahead and pick ellipse because I like this burn corners kind of effect. But I really don't want black. I want something that complements the picture. I'm going to choose like a dark blue. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that vignette size down, turn off the sharpness, maybe not mess with the angle in this particular case because I like what I'm getting here. But we've got that ability to do offset controls again. Now the next feature, light leak, I would have paid just for this. If we press choose here, you see a huge library opens up of all these different masks for light leak effects. And if you don't know what a light leak is, it's kind of like the old toy cameras where light would get through the body and be exposed to the film and overexpose it with light and kind of damage your image. But a lot of people found it very cool. If you want to see what this will look like on your image, just press this little eyeball down here and you'll see a preview of that. The preview is not with all of the other effects applied, so you kind of get a pure realization of what the light leak is doing. Here's one that I like, Cumulus. It's a really, really nice effect. I've spent hours trying to reproduce this in Photoshop, and this was just so much faster. Let's try Film Strip. I like that effect, so we'll go ahead and press apply. And one of the cool things is after you've applied that control from the library, you've got all these other controls like effect size, intensity, saturation. You can pick the color. But if I don't like this film strip running across the top, I could just press flip vertical, could put it on the bottom, or I could even just rotate it and have it run down the side. So again, more and more control over all these vintage retro effects. If you want to make it look like a print, you could choose a halftone CMYK, or even get down to like a 2-spot color print. You can see here we've got the ability to go in and pick those ink colors to affect how that print looks. Now this is pretty cool, but it's not what I want for this particular effect, so I'm going to go ahead and put that back to none. And last but not least, we're going to go to the 7th tab over here, Finishing. And what I really like in here is this is where the true power of the distress and worn out effects comes in. So for example, you want a surface texture. Let's just go ahead and choose one from another library that's built in. It's a pretty extensive library. But of all these different textures that you can apply, my favorite's right down here, and it's called Parcel. And this is because it's old like parcel paper. You see it's got a fold running right through the middle there. I love that effect. It did make my picture darker though, so after I hit apply, I'm just going to go back to lab real quick, turn up that exposure, turn up my luminosity, and then I can go back and continue editing under finish. So more controls under surface. You can set the scale, that intensity. You could flip it and move things around. You could pick a texture color. But I'm going to go ahead and move on. So let's go to aging. Let's choose underneath aging. We get to see yet again another library of textures. So this is where I haven't had to spend all night looking for the textures I want. But you can see in here we've got eroded. This adds some really nice tears. We've got acid wash if we want it to look faded and kind of distressed over time. There's folded if it's been pulled out of an old scrapbook. I like acid wash. I'm going to keep that. Press apply here. And then last but not least, what kind of frame do I want it in? Well, there's another library. So we'll go in here. Maybe I want something like a postcard or something like scalloped. Lots of options. I'm just going to go ahead and press apply on that one. And if you're happy with everything when you're done, you can press OK, or you can choose generate frame and new layer, and this will actually duplicate your image layer and make all of these effects applied to a copy. Now another option that's not mentioned here is that you could do this to a smart object layer, and that would allow you the ability to come back later and edit all of these settings again as needed. So let's just go ahead and press OK. And there we go. There's my effect looking really cool. I've got all my stains in here, my fold, got my cool scalloped frame going on. So I'm pretty happy with this effect. Now, that didn't take a lot of time, and you can imagine if you're not narrating it, it's even faster. But one of the things I realized is that you can use this tool not only for photography, but you could also use it for some cool design projects. So if I tab over here, here's a piece of type that I created in Photoshop, just a little offset shadow, kind of looking old and vintage. And with just a couple of presses of that auto button, I managed to produce something like this. So I could see this utility, this filter, this plugin being used for cool typography projects, maybe for some poster designs or some band art, some cool t-shirt design. That really the options are limited to your own creativity. But I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's worth playing with, and I'd like to see what you guys produce with it. So I hope you check it out, and I hope you enjoyed the review, and I look forward to seeing what you make out there. Have a great one.